Good afternoon, members, the support staff, to our visitors. Good afternoon, and welcome to the House Chamber. And we're back from our very, very, very short recess that took almost a week, but we're back here on the table. And before our recess, last week, Friday, we had the understanding from the Senate Vice President that we get an audience with MPOT, and we have with us this afternoon MPOT. If we can, Sarge, if we can please bring up the MPOT team. And thank you, Chairman Long and Council Torres. Good afternoon again. Welcome to the chamber, and hopefully we can get this stuff ironed out. Mr. Vice President, would you like to have them formally introduce themselves, or we're good?
I'm just for the record.
For the record, please introduce yourself, Chairman.
Sure. Thank you, members of the committee. We appreciate the time that you've given us. My name is Philip Mendiola Long. I'm the current chairman of the Marianas Public Land Trust.
Good afternoon, members. Chairman, I'm Robert Torres, Counsel for MPLT.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. I open the floor to the Senate Vice President as per your request to have MPOT with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Council and Chairman. I guess before we move anywhere, has MPOT reviewed the version that passed the Senate in regards to this MPOT line of credit and loan? And if you have, just off the bat, were there any concerns you had in regards to that legislation?
I believe that was the one, the bill that we're here for today, correct? Just to be clear?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you were provided several proposals since then, but if that is the one that you're aware of, the one that passed the House, then yes.
Yes, we have reviewed it, and from a legal standpoint, I'll let my legal counsel address it. But from the trustee standpoint, as far as the MPLT provisions were included in the bill, we didn't have any issues with it. Our main concern was, of course, the withholding authority. And then I'll let Rob talk about the legal issues.
So just to kind of start out with the perspective from MPLT, right? Actually, the perspective from the applicant. So MPLT's function is to invest land lease income and remit the revenues. So the the discussion is that in July of 2023, there was an application from the Office of the Governor, letter signed by the Senate President and the House Speaker, requesting a $20 million line of credit from MPLT in order to fund the EDA, Economic Development Administration, grant projects. That's I think about 100 million, and in the letter there was about 14. There's a supplemental letter of about 14 projects, and so that's the applicant. This is an application for an investment, and so just to kind of, I know we were talking about legislation, but in the context of MPLT, the trustees are determining whether or not, first, to exercise due diligence and whether or not this investment is prudent. And there are different types of investments, as you know, locally speaking, such investments are in the form of loans. For example, the Commonwealth Health Center loan of $5 million that generated 5.5% interest, and that income was generated benefiting under our diversified local investment. So now we have the line of credit application as an investment vehicle from the CNMI application is for these projects. So the trustees are looking at an investment. So what is the security for the investment? And so Public Law 23-12 was the first effort at that, but it did not have the withholding provision. why is the withholding provision material for MPLT coming close at all to approving this investment? Without without a withholding provision that would secure the funds that MPLT would otherwise remit in the event of a default, this would be an unsecured investment. So if we pose the question, what are unsecured investments or high risk investments that you get a higher risk rate of return? So if the trustees were able to have an unsecured investment that would earn 8% on the open market versus Public Law 23-12 at 5.5%, and I would ask everyone, which one would you go for? You would say the one with the 8% because it's prudent and you get a greater rate of return if they're both being equal. So the purpose of the withholding is to provide the security such that it would not be an unsecured investment. House Bill 23-95, Senate Substitute 3, was emanating from the House to come back and correct that and bring in the withholding provision in the event of a default of the line of credit. As has been, we've got the PSS loans, other versions of that have been in the past. So I'm very familiar with the reason why we have the withholding, which also goes all the way back to the home loan program. It's security and collateral to be able to secure that. So House Bill 23-95, Senate Substitute 3, has the withholding language. It does have the additional provisions for the loan to the first and second municipality, I believe, for up to $1 million. So that's why I started out with the applicant. What is before MPLT is an application for an investment for a line of credit. That is what is being considered. And the interest is simply what is the security. So from a matter of considering that application, that language is in there. What does it mean with respect to the other potential transactions that the legislature, if it passes, would want to be done? As you know, case-by-case basis, MPLT, if it receives any supplemental application, would have to, trustees would have to consider that separately and independently. So not to be so blunt, but it's the investment responsibility of whether it's prudent as to anything in whatever law is always going to be that of the trustees, and we know the legislature understands that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but those are kind of some of the views from MPLT's perspective on the legislation.
Thank you, Council. So, from our understanding, right, like you mentioned, we started at 2312 and now we're here at 2395 with the understanding that MPLT's concern is not having the provision of the withholding of the future interest income. But with the 2395, are there any concerns as to how with having the additional provision that provides the loan to the district, and that there's this understanding that the districts can draw down from that 1 million each and have any repayment towards that loan be done after the U2 is satisfied? Are there any concerns in regards to that? Because I mean, the way the version is now, if this passes the conference committee, will you come back and say we can't honor that, or we won't agree to that loan portion because of these I don't know, circumstances, just like how we came about 2395 from 2312, if you understand that question?
Yeah, I think we wouldn't be able to answer that question because we haven't seen the proposal yet. So the issue would be the legislature can do one thing. They can pass the legislation and authorize a potential agreement with each municipality. However, it's the sole discretion of MPLT to make that decision of whether that is a prudent investment or not, and what each senatorial district provides as their form of debt service or payment, and we'd have to work out those deals. So I think that's why legal counsel was specific in that we've only been presented by actually only one applicant at this point, and that applicant is the CNMI government. If the legislature chooses to include more applicants, we would be unable to answer any of those questions until we see the actual application, and that'd be the only thing we would have concern with.
But in terms of the payment agreement and that future interest will be used to repay on that loan, whatever agreement you is decided between MPOT and the municipality, would the payment agreement work in the manner where the loan can be drawn down, can be taken today, but then repaid after you two is satisfied?
Yeah, I think we'd have to see the impact on the return on the investment over the term of both the LOC and the FEMA loan. We've reallocated our investments since coming in as new trustees, and we're trying our best to pay off that debt as fast as we can. We've gone from a 6 to 7 year projection to now a 3-year projection of passing it off based on how we maneuvered the different types of asset allocations on how we invested. So we're basically focusing on interest yield. So the higher yield we get, of course, the interest you guys receive for appropriation to from the general fund. So based on how many years both that one and the LOC accrue would mean how many years we would carry essentially each senatorial district without getting paid. So we would have to compare that type of investment versus, like Rob had explained, making an investment in a bond that is yielding 3.5% or a high yield bond that's yielding 11. So we would have to go through that analysis. Not saying that we would choose one way or another, but we would just have to go through the process and see what that impacts are. And if the trustees feel comfortable with the impacts, either choosing to go with the 8% yield or choosing to go with the municipality loan at 5.5 or 7 or whatever you guys set that yield at, it would be the sole discretion of MPLT then to determine whether we enter into that agreement. And that's only because, again, like our legal counsel explained, is we're struggling with the issue right now of being held to a high yield market. Prior to 2 years ago, making any loan to the CNMI government was better than making an investment in the bond market, because the bond market's yielding 1.5%, 2%, for U.S. Treasury. Now the U.S. Treasuries are north of 3.5%, 4%. So, we want to make sure that we go through that process and make that prudent investment at the end of the day. But we would have to be given that time to make sure that we make that decision prudently.
So the legislation anticipates that if there is a loan, the method of repayment that is being authorized is to withhold the distribution income, right? That's how, if there was a loan to each senatorial district of $1 million, each senatorial district wouldn't have to pay that. We just hold back $1 million each on it. And so if that's just the small box of the question, does MPLT have any problem with that? I mean, you're authorizing it for the district to do so. So MPLT is not in the discussion because there's no application. But it seems like that's what the changes want to do from a policy or funding perspective. So that's okay. Just to answer that in its purest form, if the legislation becomes law, then it's presumed to be given effect and presumed to be valid. But it's just a different discussion when it comes to MPLT and the districts come. So in recent history, you may recall that the Tinian municipality, I think, had a loan. I think it's about 1.1 million. This was to pay the U.S. Geological Survey. Remember that case for the judgment, and that MPLT made an investment decision, and that loan was repaid back from I think the IPI distribution of the share on that, as opposed to withholding. So I only cite that as an example because there was security to repay as opposed to withhold. But again, in MPLT's experience, we've had different ways. One is repay, like CHC and the Tinian municipality, and the other one is withhold, like the U2 loan and others. So, but I think you all know that, right?
Yeah. Well, I think our main concern is that you know, with the way the Senate had produced this product, is we don't want to come back later on and make amendments to it because of some concerns that weren't addressed in the bill, like how 2312 lacked some of those concerns that were brought up in your discussions. And so, whatever the agreement may be between you and the mayors of the municipality, that could come at a later time. We just want to make sure that the authorization to go into that debt is something that is agreed upon or can be agreed upon by MPOT, and whatever the outcome will be with your discussions with the mayor.
Yeah, so there's one other important factor that we're missing. So in portfolio management, there's an asset allocation study that needs to be done to determine which type of assets we'll invest in, and there'll be equities, fixed income, or alternative types of investments. For all intents and purposes, the CNMI government loans are alternative, but we treat it as a fixed asset because the yield is stable, and the legislature has given their full faith and credit on our ability to withhold. So we move it from a more high risk investment into a more safer investment because of that withholding capability. So the Senate, you guys are asking us if we have any issues with the language. We actually prefer that language to withhold because that allows us to lower the yield a little bit more to make sure that you're treated as a risk-free rate of return, basically, because we control the keys to that car. Now, going back to the asset allocation, when I first started, I talked about how we reduced the time necessary to pay off the first $10 million loan for FEMA. And we were estimated at almost 7 years when we got in. And now we have that down to about 3 years. In order to make that 3-year target, we're required to put so much invested in equities, so much invested in fixed income, and so much invested in alternatives. And we are tapped out at this point at 20 million. So the question would be, if the municipality comes to us and they beat, for instance, CHC's request that is currently pending, or a subsequent request from CUC that we've been hearing rumors about, but we haven't actually received a formal request, that impacts other people that may be behind you on providing capital over as a loan to any of the other agencies. So for instance, let's say Tinian is first, they prepare their documents, they're ready, you guys approve this legislation, it's approved, we provide the $1 million. So now we only have 4 million available in our asset allocation to go to other agencies. And CHC has requested 5 million. So that means now only 4 million is available. And then if Rhoda comes in and asks,
I think there's a misunderstanding. This would be from the 15. So we're cutting down the 15 to maybe 12 based on the understanding. So we're gonna work within that 15.
Okay,
yeah.
so then it wouldn't have any impact on our current asset allocation. Our current asset allocation attributes 20 million extended for a DLI.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Any Senate member? Okay. Thank you. Do you have anything? I yield to the House if they have any questions.
Thank you, Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Long. Thank you, Council. Actually, the main reason why we had MPOT here this afternoon was because of this concern that the Senate brought up, where you're trying to get a guarantee, and obviously Mr. Long had explained it pretty clear that a proposal has to be made to MPOT. One of the challenges that both houses right now we're hopefully getting closer to completing the negotiation is the type of legislation that's going to exit this conference committee. We're obviously in a position from the outside. We rejected the version of the Senate side based on two subject matter, and I understand that the vice president was questioning on the on the Senate version that included the loan to the respective municipalities. Would MPOT, I guess, treat that the same way if they do the line of credit? If it's a line of credit, can we still utilize the withholding after the U2 loan to pay off that line of credit?
So you're saying instead of a loan to the municipality, it would be an LOC?
Yes, to maintain the one subject matter of the legislation, to make it constitutional, make it one subject
Yeah,
matter.
that would. I mean, legal counsel. I mean,
Same,
it would-
obviously, with the same proposal, and all, MPOT gets to review all of that stuff.
So it'd look exactly like the current bill with the CNMI government in that we get to withhold in case the LOC fails in
Yes,
payment.
yes.
Yeah, I don't.
So it's a line of credit all around.
A line of credit all around to make it a one subject matter legislation rather than two subjects.
A line of credit. Okay, so for MPLT again, reminding that there is the applicant here with the Office of the Governor. So, and I know it's signed by the members of the House and the Senate, but we need to amend that application, if you will, if this bill becomes law for the governor to, which presumes that if he signs it, he's endorsing that. But the difference, if it be for the senatorial district, is not EDA, is it also has to be EDA funded, right? Reimbursement.
Yes, that's the current, or not the current language. In the Senate version, it's a loan, but it's also inclusive of CIP projects.
So local senatorial districts would be reimbursed from EDA under this line of credit scenario if it's an all around?
If it's not, it may mean they're trying to expand it beyond the EDA to
Right.
make it include CIP projects. So potential CIP projects down the road, they can utilize their line of credit of $1 million to address those projects,
To advance.
and then use the withholding to address the payment.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Let me jump in. So, in that circumstance, there is no withholding to pay within 30 days. So it'd be different. For the CNMI government, you have an outside source of funding that is being pledged by the U.S. federal government that is actually swept into an MPLT controlled account with our agreement with the governor and then we control when we draw down out of that. So that gives us a pretty significant power on controlling that revenue or the income from the federal government. In the municipality standpoint, if there is no federal agency that is going to reimburse the municipalities for their projects, then MPLT is left with only the withholding as a debt service. It is not an LOC. That is actually a loan because we would not be able to pay the LOC for 5 years or depending on what happens with the CNMI government, right? So heaven forbid, if the CNMI government fails, then now withholding has to pay for what their failure is. So that tax on top of what we're already paying for the FEMA. So that makes a much longer payment horizon till we can make the municipalities whole. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that if there is no other outside source coming to the municipalities, we will not be able to make a payment on that LOC for 5 years, 6 years. And then for all intents and purposes, that's not by definition a line of credit.
Yes.
so it has to still be a line of credit, which presumes repayment rather than line of credit, but then take it for when you're going to distribute later, which is a loan. I don't know if we answered your question.
No, you did, and that's where we're at right now, and we'll get back to that. Recognize Senator Carl, please.
Thank you. And I believe the Senate substitute was trying to address that, being that already we knew that the withholdings were part of the agreement from EDA. My understanding is Secretary or Department of Finance would submit a pre-approval to EDA, and once they receive that, MPLT would then transfer the money out and get repaid within 30 days.
Correct.
Now, we had to remove that language from the senatorials because we're not already on the pre-approved list for the drawdowns on EDA. So that's why we put in the language that terms and conditions would be agreed upon at a later date. And if they weren't agreed upon, then they just wouldn't be accessed at all. It would be, you know what I mean, no harm, no foul.
And this would be an LOC? Are we still talking about
No, a line
LOC
of
or a
credit.
loan?
No, ours is just a loan.
Loan, okay.
Yeah.
So
for the senatorials. That's why the Senate removed the request from the line of credit, because we already understood that the withholdings were already being collateralized against what is, like you said, in the event that there's a problem with EDA, the transaction, liquidation, or whatever, you guys would have that as your backstop.
Mhm.
And we could not tap into that because, or side and separate, we don't have a mechanism to fulfill the 30-day repayment policy for the line of credit that's in the legislation.
correct.
You bet.
Thank you, Senator Carl. Vice President, please.
Thank you, Chair. So again, just to clarify, if we stuck with this language of a line of credit for the full 15 million, but the proposal that was brought up in one of our discussions was that 3.5 would be for the districts. I guess the plan was that the 3.5 would be drawn down immediately as soon as the agreement is made. And then once the U2 loan is satisfied, future interest income will pay down on that line of credit for the 3.5. And that, let's just say 1 year's worth of interest income can pay that down. We're allowed to continue drawing down on that line of credit for the remainder of the 7-year term. Is that something that
Yeah, I think
MPOT is?
for this body would be the determination of a definition and differentiation between what is a line of credit and what is a loan. Lines of credits are usually temporary in nature and short. For all intents and purposes, what the municipalities would be asking for would be longer term, because we wouldn't be able to satisfy the debt until the FEMA loan is paid, which is 3.5 years, or whatever may happen or may not happen with the current liability with the CNMI government should this bill proceed. So that would be, it wouldn't be something that we would define. It'd have to be you guys that kind of define that. But yeah.
Thank you. Are you, Chair?
Thank you, Vice President. Any further?
I'm just trying to think that we have interests that we're trying to see how we can resolve, right? I mean, it's not anything new that MPLT hasn't seen, and it's understandable. It's just that it's kind of difficult given the different natures of the proposed instruments. We know what the senatorial districts need. At best, the legislation can authorize the withholding, but would have to carry the obligation to make a compelling case for a transaction with MPLT. But if the legislation only says a line of credit, then it's got to be a line of credit. And if it says a loan, then it would authorize a loan for the withholding with the repayment. But you can't be both, right? You can't do both, and you can't fit in a loan into a line of credit, and a line of credit can't fit into a loan. That's just apples and oranges in that. And hopefully but from MPOT's perspective, that's the struggle. Plus, you add on top of it that the investment has to be prudent. Plus, you add on top of it the obligation that has to be secure. So we don't want to be the one to kind of rein on the discussion, but it's just we want to make sure that the discussion is informed for MPLT, that the application from the administration for the 14 EDA $100 million projects that are going to be reimbursable, to be able to proceed with that transaction for the line of credit, if it's to be secured, requires the withholding. And as they say, we'll stay in our lane and leave the discussions, but it's important that we just kind of emphasize that. And the trustees, it's also work on the other side, and it's hard because we're trying to accomplish a need of the Commonwealth that's compelling with $100 million worth of projects. It's just that uh, sometimes we're a little bit in a corner that precludes some things from happening.
And if I may
Thank you.
add, if I may add, I presume there will be another request coming to the legislature from CHCC. And in that sense, CHCC is not an LOC. CHCC is actually a loan. So there's that.
Thank you, Chairman. Rip, I'm sorry.
Question
Senator
to
Sedina.
MPLT. Would you, from your standpoint, have an issue if we could agree that we will go through with a line of credit? And I know you've stated already that the municipalities would be considered a loan by standard definition, right? Would MPLT have an issue with the municipalities having access to the 1.2? It's that's our discussions, 1.2. Your understanding is 1 million, right? 1 million for the two senatorial districts, 2 and 1, with a deferred interest.
Yeah, I don't think that would be something we've ever entertained, only because we'd have to compare it to other investment vehicles, and we're going to be held to that standard. So the question that the fiduciary would have to answer at that point is, why did you give the money to the municipalities at a deferred interest, and then for the CNMI government you didn't, or for CHC you didn't? So we just have to have a process to which where we get that decision process, and whether we make an agreement or not agreement, usually it's not measured on what the result is, it's the process. So that's why we say it's usually not an immediate decision. We have to meet with our consultant, we have to meet with our attorney, and then take all that information and then make a sound, prudent decision at that point. But yeah, I don't, highly unlikely, I would say, but not impossible.
Senator, you still have the floor.
How about let's say 1 million to the two districts with the interest added on to the principal, and the payment would be the withholding after 3 years or whenever the U2 loan has matured?
Yeah, again, these are questions that are better left to if the legislation is passed, and then we would enter into those agreements with the municipalities. And I'm sorry, Senator, I apologize, I can't answer the question clearly enough, but we do, as a fiduciary, we have to have time to review the material and the presentation. Yeah, and most importantly, compare it to what my financial advisor says is a similar type of investment vehicle that may yield a higher interest rate. And at that point, then the trustees are faced with a very difficult decision.
You still have the floor. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chairman. Any further questions? Please. Senator Carl, please.
Yeah, just for to clarify, does MPLT have an issue with the language in the Senate version that spells out the opportunity to iron out terms and conditions at a later time for that $1 million loan?
No, but we were concerned with who the legislature gives authority to execute. So it's a CNMI fund that is authorized by the legislature. So is the governor that is going to be signing the document on behalf of the municipality, or is it the legislature that is going to grant that authority to each municipality to sign on behalf of the state, right? Because these are state funds. So that was the only question we had with that particular agreement. And if the legislature is clear, like Rob says, we presume that it's legal until challenged. And if the governor signs it, obviously it's, in his opinion, he agrees. So we just wait for that to occur. But that was the only concern that we had. How you guys dictate on what you define certain language to be, that would be up to you. And then, of course, it'd be up to us to make sure that the investment meets our prudent practice.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you again, Chairman. Any further questions? So, no further questions. We'll go into recess and we'll release MPOT so they can go back to their drawing board. All right. Should we turn it off? Short recess, please. All right, thank you. Thank you again, colleagues, and we apologize to the general public for the recess. We'd like to thank MPOT as well for joining us this afternoon to share their thoughts and answer the questions that we had presented to them. We will now go back into recess until 2 p.m. Monday afternoon. Thank you, colleagues.